Hey everybody, it's me, DeoGenZ. Welcome back to my Pokemon Crystal walkthrough. On the last episode, I lied and said that was our last badge, or I forgot that it was our second to last badge, and really today's episode is the day where we will get our last badge in Fuchsia City. The fastest way, the best route to get to Fuchsia City, in my opinion, with the least amount of hassle from trainers to deal with, is the cycling road. And it's very convenient because it's right off of Celadon City, due west, and then immediately south. What's fun about Bicycling Path, if you've never been on any cycling path before, is that whatever direction the magnets pull you in, you don't even have to hold the D-pad, it will just auto throw your character in that direction. And going against the magnets make you go at a walking type speed, even though you are on a bike, so normally you expect to be flooring it. But that was a really cool thing about the cycling path that used to freak me out when I was a kid. I used to buy into those ghost stories they would tell about people's bikes going crazily out of control. Someone who tried to get back to Celadon from Fuchsia was fighting some sort of invisible force. I thought, oh no! This is that dreaded route that they spoke of. And to make it worse, they had these gang biker guys here, so I thought this definitely was no good area. But if you think about it, physics-wise, it must be a really good place to work out. Because they're not sitting on bicycles, they're sitting on motorcycles. And I don't know if you've ever sat on a motorcycle before or tried to move one before, ever had that experience. It's a heavy freaking device. It's a humongous piece of metal monstrosity that when you do ignite it with petroleum goes pretty fast, but when it's just sitting there sedentary, it's really hard to move and manipulate the way you want. These guys are just going back and forth, flipping, looking around for opponents to face. By this point, their bodies must be as butch as 2,000 Machamps. Just maneuvering the bike back and forth, not moving anywhere, resisting the magnetic force. Almost kind of like how Vegeta trained in those high-intensity increased gravity chambers. The more gravity weighted on your shoulders, the more muscle mass you make, and easier it is to navigate the world whenever you got out of the chamber. But they've done that kind of tactic in many anime. I know they did something similar like that with the Soul Wave in Yu Yu Hakusho. If anybody is a fan of that, shout-outs! Because that was an excellent anime. But they did that with the Soul Wave, Genkai's Soul Wave that Yusuke had to take on, and it acted as shackles, or rather, he had spiritual shackles to take in the Soul Wave, because the thing with that was that it was so powerful it could potentially destroy him. And does it destroy him? Well, you'll just have to watch the anime to see if that happens. But it was a very awesome episode, and it's no illusion that any sort of resistance you use, especially even in the real world, the more strength you can gain. The harder you make something to do for yourself usually makes you, not always, but usually makes it easier at a different point. If you train with shackles on, in Pokemon for example, if you keep grinding your experience points, when you get to real battles against trainers like these, you can see that they're a cinch. Battles are nothing when you have your Pokemon well leveled up, but the only way that happened is because we stuck our nose to the grind and leveled up as much as we possibly could on experience points. And so while it's not a physical rigor to go through in our training session because it's a digital experience, it still wanes on our mind while we'd rather be outside or doing something productive with our time. Instead, we're just grinding Pokemon levels. That was probably the best thing that happened once my YouTube channel started to make a little bit of money. Then I could finally say, it's actually worth grinding here because it's potential dollars. But before that, some nights I just thought to myself, why? Why won't I let myself go to sleep? Why am I so addicted to the mon of Poke? But it was true. At one point in my life, I was so heavily addicted to Pokemon that my parents had to take away my Game Boy and Crystal away from me. And they took it away from me out of the house. They took it miles and miles and miles and miles away, thousands of miles away, so I could not even find it in the house and play it when they were not looking. Because my dad, he's a merchant marine, so all his life he's worked out to sea on dredging vessels or oil rigs, whatever he's got to be working on to make the money at the time. So back then he worked on a dredging vessel, and they took my Game Boy and game out there with him, and I was not able to play any video games, because back then I only had a Game Boy Advance, any video games for an entire year, until I got my shit straight and I was able to do life and not be super addicted and only play Pokemon. Because I mean, it would get so bad where I just would not sleep. I would just constantly play. At night, I'd have that little Game Boy folding laptop light that you could attach to the back of it. I'd have that to play throughout the night, endless hours, and it was just ridiculous. I was not doing well in school, so that had to be done. But whew, thank goodness that horribleness is over, because here's the thing that really kicked me in the sack was when I finally got my Game Boy Advance back, finally got my first gaming device back, and my first game that got me into the whole thing. I went to go open my file, and it had been so long since I turned on the game, because after a while with the Game Boy Color cartridges, unfortunately, if you don't touch it for a long while, you don't restart or activate the battery in whatever way it needs to be, its internal clock runs dry, and whatever that means, it deletes your save file. So after all of that intensive training, after that long-ass journey, and then an entire year of embargo, not being able to experience anything with Pokemon, digitally at least, trust me, I still found any Beckett magazines I could, cut out the cards, and played with them myself, but yeah, that was a rough year. That was a really defining moment in gaming for me, because I easily could have became a gaming addict if my parents didn't step in and said, hey, you need to realize that gaming's not the only thing here. But I certainly did get carried away, and I'm glad that that period in my life is over, because now, at a point where I could make money potentially off of video games, it would be even more increasingly easy to become addicted to it. And whether it's cigarettes or coffee, anything in excess is just too much, and it's not a good thing. It becomes unhealthy. Because once you become way fixated on games, you become truly addicted to them, that is, you know, people can get addicted to that heightened experience. It's not a drug per se, but it's visually stimulating to the cortex, and very much like a drug, it's instant gratification oftentimes. When you get achievements in doing something very simple, but the more achievements you get, the more it drives you into the experience, almost the chasing the dragon sensation that you have with drugs that I've heard of, that you can kind of find in video games. So it's a real addiction to be aware of. It's a real something to make sure that you have under control, and make sure that you're not putting off things in your own life. I want to get as much experience as possible, but putting things off in your own life in order to intake this one experience, because life ultimately always comes down to balance. Because you can have too much of a good thing, you could have too much good food, you just barf at a certain point, your stomach just cannot hold anymore. So you have to know the balance. You have to know the balance of social life, know the balance of getting outside, breathing fresh air. Because what good is gaming so many hours if you feel like shit, because you're eating poor food, you're never exercising, so your body, which is made to do things physically outside all the time, you know, it doesn't get that exercise, and it just tends to build up that strength, or not that strength, rather, that rage and frustration of needing to do things physically. I've ran into a couple of people in the gaming community just randomly, and in my school last year even, in my community college, I ran into somebody who was really a dangerous person, because all he did all the time was play StarCraft. And then whenever somebody was joking with him, he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle it. He was a mega troll. Busted out one time saying, "You wouldn't like me when I'm psychotic." No, we wouldn't. So please, calm down. Go outside. Take a walk once in a while. The real world is a beautiful place. Not only the world of digits is good, this real thing we got going on, this real world of 3 dimensions that is actually high definition without having to do any kind of driver updates, it's pretty fantastic once you get the time to look at it. You just have to apply that curious nature you have with video games in life, and maybe even integrate some things in your mind as if it was a video game. That's how it got very easy for me to do school, when I looked at it as a point system. The more points I got, and the more reward I would get for the basic notoriety of doing good, then the better things happen. So making that connection, seeing it as gaining experience, that's how I do it now. I basically have to gain experience so I can grow new levels and evolve as a person, not as a Pokemon, but That's how I integrate gaming life into real life. So you could still take those elements outside of gaming, continue to maintain balance, keep the homeostasis happening, and still enjoy games. It's what I do today. It's what I hope that people can enjoy as well, because what I've really seen happening big time with the internet, there are some people who just get lost in it. There are some people who really just only go on Facebook and they don't communicate ever in real life anymore with their friends. There's actually a great episode of Holic, XXX Holic, which is another fantastic anime. I think that's like 3 awesome anime we've named in this one episode. DBZ, Yu Yu Hakusho, and then Holic. But there was an episode of that where there was this woman who was completely possessed by her internet, and the only way that Yuko, one of the main protagonists in the story, could help that woman was if she helped herself. She can do everything in her power to, she even at one point destroyed the computer, but that's not going to stop that woman from going online. There's internet cafes, there's always another option to buy another computer when she gets the money. So really at the end of the day, it came down to her, and everything, whatever the decision may be, comes down to you, including your happiness. So it's absolutely your choice, and it's absolutely your choice to integrate everything you do that's fun in your life into the more less fun aspects like going to school. Now how I treat it, because I'm a big podcast fan and I listen to podcasts all the time, now how I treat college lectures is that it's not some obligation or some responsibility that's so onerous and burdensome over my head that I have to worry about GPA-wise. It's just a fun live podcast that I get to attend where the speaker is very competent in what they're talking about, and I get to learn something that I've never learned before. So now it's fun. But what's more fun than all of that is getting another gym badge. And what we have to do to beat Janine is bring psychic types. That's why it's really advantageous to start off in Saffron City. Make sure that you explore that area well enough that you go to Mr. Psychic's house, get that TM, and equip it to one of your Pokemon, because with that one TM, you'll have no problem sweeping Janine. Her team is kind of laughable in that she has 2 repeats. She has 2 Weezings on her team that are exactly the same. I mean exactly the same in level, in moveset. It's really, I see it as lazy programming whenever a gym leader has the same Pokemon that has the exact same stats and sets. I mean, maybe when you get down to the nitty-gritty metadata, maybe, just maybe, they have different natures and they're slightly altered. But I really would like to see a different poison type in every slot of her roster. Why she couldn't have an Arbok on her team, I'm not sure. But for whatever reason, the developers didn't give it to her. So, Enemy Ariados is done. What's great about those Weezings, since this is a 2nd generation game, is abilities haven't been invented yet. That's something really cool that people who have started out in later generations going back in time to see Pokemon's history may not even be aware of. At the 2nd generation point, there was no such thing as an ability, so you could still use Earthquake, another very super effective type to use on poison types, being ground. You could use Earthquake on Weezing and not have to worry about levitation, which is awesome, because 2 out of the 5 members here are Weezing. So you can take them out one shot simply with Earthquake, which is another very strong TM that you should have obtained at this point in the game already. I think we got it in the episodes when we were exploring the route to the Elite Four. And when you don't feel like using ground, maybe you just want to switch it up a bit, because we are so super strong here. I mean, wow, almost 20 plus levels above. You can switch it up to Psychic too. An Espeon would be a great Pokemon of choice to bring to this team, or to bring to this match, and anything that uses Earthquake. So again, if you started out with your Cyndaquil, Typhlosion at this point is rampaging through all the gyms. That's how we can get through this game so quickly, is thanks to Typhlosion. And it wasn't because I wanted to get through this game quickly that I chose a Cyndaquil at the start. It's because of the nostalgia element. I've been talking about stories of my past throughout this entire walkthrough, and it just wouldn't be a Crystal walkthrough if I did it with anything but a Cyndaquil, my very first Pokemon of all. The very first Pokemon that I was responsible for raising and training and understand what exactly was a Pokemon. And that's funny with the border. It looks like Janine's holding her own hand. Very humorous. But that is it, guys. I made the mistake in saying this last episode, but for sure, now that we have the Soul Badge, that is it. That is all the 8 badges that the Kanto region has to offer. Starting out with Lieutenant Surge, we went up to Saffron City, faced Sabrina, completely blocked her team with Umbreon, then went to Misty, took her down with our Raichu, and Mr. Poof helped out as well. Brock was a breeze with our Slowbro, and likewise, Blaine was equally as easy with that Slowbro and Surf, and even Typhlosion helped at points with its Earthquake. Now that we've beaten Blue, Erica, and now Janine, it's time for Mount Silver.